Good morning, all. Welcome to another episode of Shared Light with Dustie and JR. I am obviously JR.
And I'm Dusty.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Just turned 46 yesterday.
It's a little bit of a milestone, especially considering you were of the assumption you were turning 45
I
for...
really thought most of the year I was turning 45. Turns out turning 46, or I turned 46. So that was a little disappointing. But what's a year?
I mean, they say with time things get better, so hopefully you feel like you're getting better.
Always room for improvement.
And there is that for sure. So there's been a lot going on in our household. Things have been crazy, stressful. I've got some things going on at work, financial things going on. Dusty's looking for a job. We've slowly but surely started putting our name out there. You've been sending out some information and whatnot to try and drum up some business for our personal venture.
Yeah. Just laying that foundation, I think.
And, as we mentioned for a few episodes now, we've had some mental health things going on with my little one that continues to impact some of our day-to-day and impact some of the things that we're doing, trying to remain in the moment with her and make sure she has the support that she needs from us, which does cause a little bit of a lag on some things, and it does cause us to reshift our focus.
Yeah.
That said, with high emotion, high conflict, high turmoil, high unknown, that can put a strain on a marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So it kind of lends itself to the topic we wanted to talk about today. I actually almost see it as a little bit of a response to a reply that we got on a post on Instagram where, we discussed, I don't even remember what the quote was, but it's something along the lines of XYZ can cause a woman to be soft and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I don't remember it because I'm not the one that's posting those daily, but I did see the reply, and the reply itself is kind of what caught my attention. And it was something along the lines of, why does the woman need to be soft, right? So it got me thinking a little bit about this topic. And I guess the response to that in particular is, I don't see softness as a weakness.
No.
Right?
I think a lot of people do.
For me, I would say that particularly in marriage and in any kind of relationship where you find yourself really invested emotionally, and this can even be with like your kids, right? Or your parents, or whatever your dynamic is with whoever you're close to.
Yeah.
Those relationships thrive when both people in that relationship choose tenderness over defensiveness.
Yeah. I think because we talk so much about communication, and we've talked about conflict, we've talked about so many different aspects, and especially for us, it's communicating in our light. But that's softness and being tender with your partner or your other relationships. That's really the nitty gritty of it. How do you do that? What exactly does that mean? Because you can communicate and not be soft. You can definitely have conflict and not be soft.
Well, I think another way that gets lost and people may not even understand is that when we speak softness, we're speaking directly about vulnerability. How are you vulnerable in the moment with that person? You have to have a level of vulnerability when you approach situations that are difficult, because that vulnerability inherently lets you enter the conversation with a little bit of curiosity.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know how this conversation is going to go, how this person is going to react. So you're essentially going into it like, the best analogy that I can think of is vulnerability is very much that dream that everybody has of standing in the front of a classroom naked, right? Mm-hmm. That feeling inside of you is what, at least what I envision when I say softness and tenderheartedness in a relationship, right? Yeah. Because being able to approach situations in that light, actually, I would venture to argue that it's more courageous than entering on the defensive.
Defensiveness.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where you have to look at the connotation that, and I don't know why it has this connotation that being soft is an inherent flaw.
Yeah, I think it's more, I think men tend to feel that way more because maybe they feel like it makes them look weak or it makes them feel weak. But like you said, you feel like it's courageous. And I would even say from my perspective, when you come at me that way, it's more safe for me. It's more inviting for me to be open and honest. And that's where we can grow and we can talk about the things that we need to, even if they're hard.
Well, and I guess when you look at it, right, it's, I see it as choosing to live empathetically and compassionately.
Yeah, and I think it's for anybody. That's a personal choice. That's with any relationship that you have. I'm, of course, that way with you, but I'm also that way with our kids. I'm also that way with our family, our friends. I feel like it's over time, people harden. The world hardens them. Things that they've gone through hardens them. And so it starts to come natural to them, especially when they're having conflict with their partner or having any kind of communication, because over time that just has start to harden them and that just comes to them naturally.
Well, and
Being soft doesn't really come naturally to some people.
well, it doesn't, I mean, me,
Yeah.
yeah, not at all, right? And we've talked about that at length, where it's not something that I'm comfortable living in, expressing, being in. But it's really good to touch on what might cause people to harden.
So many things.
I mean, you start looking at just history, right? So, like your history, past relationships, past whatever, mine of this kid who felt like he always had to prove himself, whatever it may be, right? You get all of these wounds that put you into what you feel is like survival mode, just to be in this world that you're in, causes you to build up some of those. I mean, essentially, what we're talking about is all of these walls that we build up over time,
Right.
that don't allow you to come to relationships and live in light as opposed to living in dark.
Yeah, and that can even come about as you are further into your marriage. If you start feeling unseen or unheard, those walls start to build slowly. And we've talked about that in one of our episodes as well. With those unspoken expectations, that's part of it, is those can create those walls over time.
Well, and some of that too is if you really get to the nitty gritty of it, you can start to feel like you're being taken advantage of. Because if you, in your mind, you feel like you're doing everything and you do have all these expectations that you haven't verbalized, but in your mind, now they're not living up to all of this.
Right.
You start feeling like, poor me. Not only are you seen, but now I'm doing everything in the relationship. I'm the one that's keeping us going. I'm the one that's doing this or that, right? And it, again, builds another barrier, builds another wall.
Yeah, and I think some people just are built that way because they don't know any other way.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked about it
That's what they've always known.
at length, right? I grew up in a household that was very, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And again, my parents are great. They did what the best they could, but it was very, I mean, you've met my dad, and my dad is very, even now, he's not a emotional guy. I mean, it's not like,
Yeah, and I think that goes back to how he was raised and how his grandparents were raised. And so I think it's something that can be generational, that's just what they know. They don't know how to be soft. They don't know how to let those walls down and with what people, because when you do grow up that way, and in a lot of situations, that also creates that you don't trust people.
well, maybe I've mentioned it, maybe I haven't, but studies have shown that the primary purpose of all of the chemicals in our brain, all of the chemicals and things that essentially create these emotions within you, the sole purpose of a lot of that stuff is to make sure that you are safe. You're driven by the need to stay alive, the need to feed, the need to procreate, all these things. And what ends up happening is you find that all of these walls and all of these barriers and this hardness builds up over time is because it's a form of protection. They're looking at a way to protect themselves from damage or fear or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you really start to see that, and that really manifests, which is interesting. But I feel like you really start to see that when you start getting really close to people.
Yeah, that's why I say it. You really start to see it over time in especially a marriage, because that's the person you're with every day. That's who you're sharing your life with. And so that's the person that's going to see those walls. And they see everything.
Right. So the key is, how do you reframe that?
Yeah.
How do you take yourself out of this I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's a fear, right? It's a fear of being vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
fear of being soft. How do you reframe that so that you can see it as a strength?
Yeah.
It really requires you, again, and I spoke about it, right? Empathy and compassion. To be empathetic to somebody, you have to remain open to their experiences. You have to remain
Yeah.
open to their
Perspectives.
perspective and perception on reality. While we don't always understand it, you do have to remain open to it because that is what they're living.
Yeah.
It also does take a level of maturity to remain in that vulnerable space, to be gentle, to be
Well, and you have to have that courage to be emotionally available yourself, not just open to hearing and seeing somebody else's point of view, but you have to leave yourself emotionally available and open.
yeah. And I mean, we've talked about it at length. That's something that I've struggled with for a really long time. And I've been lucky that I've taken emotional intelligence classes. I've read up on it a lot. I've learned a lot. And one of the interesting things about emotional intelligence versus just actual intelligence is that you can actively improve your emotional intelligence through learning and action.
Practicing it,
Right.
as uncomfortable as it is.
Right.
Practicing it.
Which softness is emotional intelligence in action. It's not being passively just understanding it. I mean, being soft in the moment, that is you practicing that emotional intelligence that you have. And think about, and this is again one of those things that a lot of people I think can draw experience from. Think about bosses that you've worked with, right?
Yeah.
That really listened and took time to not only understand who you were as a person, but took time to understand what motivates you, how to make you feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess that in most of those instances, they were soft-spoken, well-mannered, very just in tune with who you are as a person, which I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but I would say in most instances, that's what it is, right? You have to be able to have that softness and that approach. And when I say softness, it's not like, oh, I'm whispering. It's very much like a nurturing, almost like mentorship type relationship, right? Where you're really actively investing in.
Yeah, I think that's it. You're investing in not only what they have to say, but how they feel and their perspective. And I think that's the part that a lot of people have the hardest time with. Not you particularly, but a lot of people just get so set on how they feel about something. And especially if it's something that they're emotionally invested in, they have their own perspective. And so it really takes a lot to practice setting that aside and being open to somebody else's emotional perspective on the same thing. And a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Well, so like in marriage particularly, like those are some of the things that ends up testing your softness, right? Testing that vulnerability, testing that approach.
Yeah.
Because marriage is going to expose what really triggers you.
Yes.
It's going to really expose what makes you impatient.
Your ego.
Yeah, mine. And that's been a huge one for me, right? We talk about it all the time. My ego has gotten in the way a lot in past conversations just because I hold on to that. And ego is one of those things. If you don't know you have it, it's hard to keep in check.
Yeah.
And everybody has an ego to some extent, right?
Right.
Some bigger than others. But if you get to that far end of the spectrum where you're dealing with like a narcissist or somebody that is very self-absorbed, it's going to be real hard to communicate and to evaluate how you approach this in a soft manner, because that is going to test you.
Right.
To your point, right? In some situations where we had disagreements or arguments or whatever it may be, like if my ego is level 10, like that's just going to test your softness and how you're going to approach the situation.
Right. And it's going to make my emotions and my anxiety level 10.
Right.
So then you're fighting emotion, anxiety against ego. And it doesn't work. You don't get anywhere. You don't get anything resolved.
Well, and it forces you to move away from that we talk about all the time. You're not speaking in the light. Like at that point, you're in the dark, in the shadows. And that's when we start running into some of those situations that we've talked about in previous episodes where you're saying things just to make that person feel like you feel.
That's where you start fighting each other instead of the problem.
Right.
Like we always talk about. because now I'm fighting your ego and you're fighting my emotion, instead of we're not fighting what we're supposed to be talking about.
Right. Right. And then another big one is just your self-protection tendencies, which that's one that probably doesn't get talked about a lot, because my defense mechanisms are going to be different than yours.
Yeah.
And depending on what that mechanism is, it could very much lead to a place of vulnerability and softness.
I mean, my self-protection is to just shelve it and shut down. So again, that's my wall. I put up that wall, and that's what I've always known. But again, by me doing that, we don't get anywhere.
Right.
Nothing resolves. We can't grow. We can't get past that certain situation.
Which, I mean, we've run into a lot of those instances, unfortunately, particularly when we really started having issues like year and a half, 2 years ago, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Where in the moment, I can look back now and say, well, no, I didn't approach that very good at all. Right. But in the moment, I felt like I was being vulnerable and I was being soft.
Yeah.
And your perception of that was very different than mine. So there was still a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Where we really had to, again, that's when a lot of our non-negotiables came up and a lot of our key communication strategies came in, when we really started just to deep dive and talk about what we wanted out of these conversations.
Yeah.
And again, like, I can look back now and say I was not as in a state of vulnerability and openness as I should have been, because I still had some of those, the ego, the self-protection, the things that were challenging me. And
I feel like you thought you were being vulnerable, and I think to a degree you were. You just weren't in that softness that you have now, and that can make a difference. You, in your mind, were trying and you were being open and vulnerable with me, but if you're not being soft and tender with that vulnerability, it may come off as completely opposite of what you're trying to do.
right. Which, I mean, it was a challenge. Right? Our marriage, as great as it is, and it's great, it has been a lot of work.
It is great.
Yeah.
But that greatness comes with a lot of having to figure out the dark.
Yeah.
That's any marriage, though, I think, because just figuring out how to be soft and tender with each other is hard in its own, because you naturally don't know how to be that way. And especially when we have conflict, you don't want to be that way. And maybe you don't either. So you really have to. It's something that you continually work on, because that softness is what's going to help resolve, repair, and grow at the end of it.
Yeah. And that is a very good segue into what do you do when your partner isn't soft? How do you maintain that on your end to make sure that it doesn't escalate further?
Yeah. I don't know that I'm very good at that. You are now. I guess for me, I look at it like in the times that I struggle with my anxiety and my irrational thoughts, it's hard for me because I'm up here. But now you know, and you understand my anxiety, you understand my fears, you understand the thoughts. And so it's very, I think, easy for you now to just stay grounded and be like, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but this is your reality. It's us. I love you. We're fine. We're safe. And so I think that's where you can't match their, I think before you used to, because you were reactive. And so I think you would match my level 10. And so I think you have to stay grounded. Even if your partner's at a level 10, you need to stay in that softness.
Well, and you need to understand that there is no winning. So you're not escalating to try and win an argument.
No, we've talked about that too. It's not about winning. Nobody's keeping score.
Well, and nobody needs to be right. And that, I think, for us was, the biggest earth-shattering, groundbreaking thing that happened in our marriage was understanding that we're not always going to agree.
And we don't always have to be there's no right or wrong.
Right.
We talk about it. I think every episode is like, you have your own perspective and I have mine. And sometimes they're opposite and sometimes they clash. But we know each other's light and we know our goals and our common goals. And we know it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that you feel that way.
Yeah. And then a big one is just making sure that you are, and I think this is what has helped me the most, honestly, is that holding on to your values. What do you value? in not just yourself, but in your marriage or your relationship or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Staying true to those values when your partner is, like Dusty said, at a level 10 and you're just trying to navigate it to bring it back down so that you're able to have a constructive conversation. Because if you don't focus on those values, it's real easy to just match energy.
Yeah. I think for me, it helps to, especially when we have conflict or we have something dark that we need to get through. For me, I look at it like I love you more than this situation. I know we're going to get through it. And that's part of holding on to my values is I can look at you and be like, I love you more than whatever we're going through in this moment. So that helps me to bring myself down
Well,
where I can communicate.
and I mean, I think for me, that's similar, right? Regardless of what's going on or whatever challenge we're having, the most important thing to me is you and the kids. So no matter what happens, the outcome for me is always the same.
Yeah.
I have to get through this because it's us and the kids, right?
Right.
And that's not always going to be the case for everyone, but that's my particular
Yeah.
value set that really drives a lot of what I do. So
And we haven't always been at this place. I think that's key to put out there because that's the whole reason we started this podcast is that we haven't always been in the space that we're in today.
right.
We have done all the work and had to do a lot of work to get to where we are. But the one thing that has enabled us, I think, one of the major things that has enabled us to get here is that we still can see each other and that value above everything else that we've ever been through, above the hardships, above anything that we've had to face separately or together. That one value in each other and our family is what got us to this place.
Right. And then just kind of move the conversation along and to really go back to that comment of why does the woman need to be soft?
Right.
Softness is not rolling over and being walked all over and being mistreated.
No, I think that's the perspective though for a lot of people is.
It really is about choosing emotional integrity.
Mhm.
And again, it's that your values tie into that. Your perspective ties into that. Being able to remain in the frame of mind or have that ingrained in you, it's not a weakness.
No, I think honestly, I could say it's the opposite. To be able to remain and be in that softness when your relationship, your conversation, whatever is up here at a level 10. I don't see that as a weakness
No, no.
at all. I see it as opposite,
Because
honestly.
it's not really about, you're not actively looking to be disrespected or whatever the connotation is
Yeah.
with the word. It's just really about maintaining that, again, empathetic approach.
So how do you do that?
How do you do that? For me, and I know that it took me a really long time to get there, but it really just does start with slowing down the conversation for me when my emotions really start. Because I have a tendency to just start firing off like
Mhm.
this, because I've already got the logic behind all of it.
Right. You just want to get everything out.
And it starts to just elevate that emotion. It doesn't subside it. If anything, it just compounds
Ramps
it.
it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for you too is asking questions to better understand.
Yeah. And I talk about it constantly, being able to remain curious.
Mhm.
And taking a breath before I respond once you do answer those questions, right? Of
Right.
really just taking stock of that active listening to understand as opposed to listening to response. What is your response actually telling me? As opposed to, well, how can I respond to this so that she knows she's wrong?
Mhm. Or how can I make my argument sound better?
And then for us, it's always using little small gestures of physical connection. You guys will see it sometimes if you haven't in the podcast. Dusty will reposition so that she's able to hold my hand or will hold my arm. But little things like that help keep you in that soft, vulnerable state with your partner,
Mhm.
specifically. With a friend, it might look like giving them a random hug or just a pat on the back, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be anything like super grand. Or I like to walk by the kitchen and slap her butt from time to time. It's my own little thing, right? But being able to just maintain a level of physical intimacy.
Yeah, that can make such a difference. And we've talked about it before on one of our episodes where even if you start your hard conversations with that that can make such a difference.
Yeah.
And that can kind of reset you and your mindset. Take a couple minutes before you start those conversations and hug or cuddle or whatever that can bring you down to that softness before you even start the conversations.
Well, and I think a big one is I mentioned my buddy on here a lot, where you kill him with kindness, little micro acts of kindness, whether it be to your partner or just out. Any kind of kindness spreads and is able to keep you also in that same kind of vulnerable state of understanding that you're being emotionally invested with people and not building up those walls that we tend to put up in society.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I just am naturally that way. I never even out in public, or I've never been one to, and not necessarily that people are just mean, but a lot of people don't have that natural instinct to just smile at a stranger or strike up a conversation at the grocery store or do something kind for somebody, compliment them. Some people stay in their own lane. They don't interact when they're out.
And I'm very much some people.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not because you're mean or you don't want to. I think it just doesn't come naturally to you.
No. I mean,
And so,
that goes back to the whole your past experiences in history, right? You very much, as you get older and as you get farther along in your journey, you really have a lot of guiding habits that have been ingrained so deep in you that you just don't even think about it, right?
yeah,
One of those for us was always, it was reiterated by my grandma, it was reiterated by my parents. You don't talk to people, like, unless you're spoken to, you do
yeah,
not speak.
yeah,
So we weren't outgoing. We weren't, unless somebody comes up and I can have a conversation if somebody comes up and starts having a conversation with me, but I'm not going to be the one to engage in conversation just because
yeah,
that's not what I know.
yeah,
So it is a little bit out of my comfort zone for sure to do some of those things. It does help keep me in that mindset.
right. Yeah, because I think overall, you don't just, it's not like we go out or even with each other. I'm not actively trying to be unkind to you. I don't want to be mean to you or be unkind to you or the kids or even random people out in public. And I think a lot of people just do it without even realizing. But then if you start, let me smile at this stranger today, or start actively thinking about different ways that you can bring kindness to somebody, or especially your partner. Let me compliment them today, even if it's something that you would never do on a daily basis. That can open up and bring you down to that softness over time. Start practicing some of those things.
Well, and it helps highlight that other point that we talk about quite a bit of you never know what people are struggling with. So you never know what a small random act of kindness for somebody, what kind of impact that's going to have on their life.
No.
But then also when situations come up, and Dusty mentioned it, like with us, I stay very curious when she starts having problems, and I'm trying to just bring the conversation down to a point where we can discuss and work through, right? Even entering it with something like a really soft phrase of help me understand what's going on
Yeah.
can have a huge impact.
Yeah, that's part of just listening also, to understand instead of to react.
Right. So what does that look like though? In a hard conversation, what does softness look like? What does it mean? What does it not mean?
It does not mean that you're avoiding your truth or avoiding the conflict at hand. It just means you're approaching it differently.
Right. It doesn't mean that you're going to go silent. It doesn't mean that
No.
you're going to be passive, and it doesn't mean that you're going to agree to everything.
No. No.
It really is not about whether or not you're bringing the truth. It's about how
Right.
you're bringing it.
Yeah, how you're relaying that truth. And doing that in softness can be better understood, I think.
Right. Because like we said, it's not about rolling over and just being passive and whatever connotation you might have with the word itself. It's not.
No, it's not being passive. You're just agreeing with whatever they say and sidestepping the issue. It's just you're actively wanting to understand it and wanting to let your partner know, I'm listening. I'm trying to understand.
Well, and it's also, I mean, I think I talked about this last episode, right? It's about having that tact. You're still telling somebody the truth,
Yeah.
but you're not doing it in a manner that is hurtful. You are approaching it from a perspective of, I'm not attacking you with this truth. I am explaining this truth so that we can come to a resolution.
And that you can better understand it.
And it's about really addressing the problem instead of addressing each other.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those things that I think when you talk softness, that it gets misconstrued because people have that connotation of like,
It's weak.
like weakness. I think of really timid personalities that just don't speak up or something, which I think there's a reason for that. And that reason is highly has to do with a lot of the information that's out there regarding the way people react or the way people, especially I think movies and shows or whatever,
Yeah.
you think of somebody that's soft and they're always that timid little person that isn't speaking up or.
Yeah. But I think softness is different in every relationship, especially in every marriage. Your version of soft is different than my version of softness. But you learn that over time, I think, or you can with your partner the more you practice it. I think you need a different level of softness from me than I need from you.
Yeah. I mean, probably. I don't think, though, that there is a difference in the intent behind it.
No, not the intent. Just, I think because men seem to, like you say, they relate it like I'm weak. I can't be soft. I've got to be the man. But there are ways that I can be soft with you to still not feed your ego, but I don't need to degrade you and make you feel less than just so that you can be soft with me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. Well, and you're going to find that a lot in Latin cultures where it is a very masculine, feminine kind of just, what is that, gender, where they play their gender roles like to extremes, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other cultures. I'm not trying to single anybody out by any means. I'm just trying to provide an example of, especially I think about it from my culture and just looking at even just my family. The men do what the men do, and the women just kind of are expected to not in some parts of my family. And then we've got other parts that everybody is kind of the same. But there's a lot of that can feed into what you're talking about, where if one of my cousin goes and starts demasculating or whatever it's called, somebody in front of everybody else, that's a huge deal. Like, why did you approach it that way? Why did you?
Yeah.
And then you have instances where you can come from it from a soft perspective. And at the end of the day, the ripple effect of that is that you're going to help de-escalate conflict.
Yeah.
You're going to build, and we talked about that, right? That emotional safety. Right.
Yeah. It's part of creating that net, that safety net in your marriage.
And then again, it invites the vulnerability. It invites that space where you and your partner can be in a place that you may not be willing to be with other people.
And you need to be with your partner. I know, and some people can look at vulnerability too as weakness, but you need that in your marriage to grow.
Yeah.
And to understand each other.
Well, and it helps create a culture at home of softness. I like to look at our kids as an example of, like, my kids are really kind-hearted, almost to a detriment, right? Sometimes where they really just have this inherent want to help people around them and to be the ones that help elevating the kids. Again, sometimes it's to a detriment to them. It really does show that having that kind of connection. And I think as we've matured in our relationship, they have also shifted a little bit how they, especially my oldest, right? She's very soft, but she's also got her boundaries.
Yeah.
My little one is very soft and very kind-hearted and very just, I mean, she's full heart.
Yeah.
Everything is with her heart all the way. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to figure out the boundaries with her yet.
Yeah. She hasn't established any boundaries when it comes to that. So that affects her.
Yeah. But again, it helps create a space for them where they can be vulnerable. And honestly, it has helped create a space where my daughter talked to us about her challenges as opposed to trying just to hide them from us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's building that emotional maturity in them that they can be soft, they can be vulnerable, they can be open, honest, and that's part of their safety.
Yeah.
Part of their safety net.
And it really can, just in talking about my kids, I mean, we mentioned earlier that we've had some challenges. And I think one of the highlights of everything that's going on, if you could say that there are highlights, but I do try to find something out of everything, is that we really did see how our softness manifested with my oldest. Because my oldest is very shut in and doesn't like to let people into her guard very often.
Yeah. She's very much like you.
Right. But one thing that has come up is that, and she still likes to razz her sister, because that's just the relationships that she
Your
has.
siblings.
But she has really just taken a deep look at herself and started focusing on what she can do to be kinder to her sister.
Yeah, and how her words or her actions can affect her sister.
Right.
Even though her intent was never to be hurtful, she's really looked at and started to change. Even though that's not my intent, that's how it was received. And so that's something I need to think about before I say or I do. And that's such an important thing to learn. And some people, I mean, she's only 11, so I feel like she has learned that at a fairly young age, which is good. Some people may never figure that out.
But I mean, it just goes to show you the power of softness and how it can really just change the relationships around you. I mean, that's one example that we can just visibly see.
Yeah, it can model so many different aspects of life.
And I would like to say that it's because we're doing all this work and doing all these things, but I won't take credit for that at all. I think she just has a kind heart. She understands a lot of the stuff that we're talking about inherently and has taken it upon herself just to do what she can
Yeah,
to make sure that.
because I don't feel like I said earlier, and the same in our marriage, that's the same in maybe for a lot of people, is that you never want to intentionally hurt somebody you love. I think that is the major thing to reflect on too, is when you're maybe thinking, I don't know how to be soft, or I've never been soft, or I can't be soft. Just think back to, what is your intention? Is your intention to be mean? Is your intention to hurt somebody? And if it's not, you can be soft.
Yeah.
You can learn that. You can practice that.
And it's a shared practice. I mean, it's something that, I mean, I have come to learn a lot from my wife. I've come to learn a lot. I mean, obviously through a lot of just formal and informal education, the leadership position that I hold, but then my kids, I am constantly learning things from. So it's not something that you're ever going to master.
No.
But to Dustie's point, right? It's, what is my intention? What areas do I have where I do have more of a hardened look at things or a hardened approach?
And what has hardened me over time?
Right.
That I can get that softness back.
And where is that softness looking to come back? Because you will find instances where it's a lot more inherently natural to be soft than it is to be hard.
Yeah, you may have just learned over time to put up that wall and that hardness.
So with that, it's been a pleasure. I do want to call attention to our shop site, the shop section of our website.
Our merchandise.
Right, at www.sharedlightpodcast.com under the shop section, and continue sharing your light. Kindness matters, light matters. There is an awful lot of dark in the world, and the more light we're able to spread, the more positive the world becomes. So with that, I hope you guys have a blessed day, and we'll see you on the next one.